Somebody's clock is about a minute slow.
That would be me, David.
Hey, Turner, we missed you at the board meeting yesterday.
Yeah, I forgot completely about it again.
They say that and the legs are the first things to go, David.
I'll never know. I've always been this way.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. It's a little after 10. We've got a great program today. Welcome everyone to our normal second Saturday programs, sponsored by the Friends of Hagerman National Wildlife Refuge. You know, we have a special speaker today. Jessica is going to talk to us about mountain lions, and she's a professor at Austin College and is a regular speaker on our second Saturday programs at Hagerman, and always well-attended programs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica and let her kind of tell us a little bit about herself, and then launch into the program. And I can see your screen, Jessica.
Super. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. So I am Jessica Healy LaPrice. I work at Austin College. I'm originally from Iowa and migrated down here after going to graduate school at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado, where I did a PhD in hibernation ecology. So my specialty is actually small mammals. I specialize in ground squirrels and their hibernation, but I'm also a broadly trained mammologist. And so I do a lot of talks about mammals in general. And so today we're going to the large side of the mammal spectrum, and we're going to talk a little bit about cougars. So this is one name for this giant cat whose scientific name is actually Puma concolor. So Alan, if you could go ahead and launch the first poll here. If you guys will participate in this poll, select which of these following animals is the same as the mountain lion. So go through that list. And once it looks like, Alan, enough people have voted, you can go ahead and share those results so people can see what the results of the poll were. All right, so 14 people said cougar, 14% of people said cougar, people said mountain screamer, but then 84% indeed said. So if we look at the various names of this particular species, we do indeed find that it has more names in common of pretty much any mammalian species. It has more than 40 names just in English alone relating to this one particular animal. So everything from mountain lion to cougar, puma, panther, shadow cat, which is a really good one. One of my favorites is mountain screamer, as well as things like catamount, and a variety of names in Spanish as well. So all of these cats, all of these names rather, refer to one type of cat, and that is the mountain lion. So who is the mountain lion? Who is it actually most closely related to, and why does it have so many names? To answer those questions, let's look a little bit about where the mountain lion falls in the greater family tree of carnivores. So this is showing us a tree of all of the organisms that fall in the taxonomic order Carnivora. So this can be a little bit confusing sometimes because not all the animals listed here are actually carnivorous. An example would be the panda over here, right? This is something that basically eats just bamboo, right? It's kind of an herbivore, but it's closely related to and has a common ancestor that ate meat. And so everybody on this big figure here is in the order Carnivora. So this is broken down into two major groups. We have the cat-shaped organisms in the group called Feliformia. Fela, again, the prefix is cat. And then the dog-shaped things fall into this smaller group, Caeniformia. So what we're looking at here, if we go back into the feliforms, are the things that are basically cat-shaped. So this is going to include things like, interestingly, hyenas, fossas, meerkats are going to fall into this group, but the cats that we're talking about today fall into this big family called Felidae. So what we're going to do is take the felids and specifically at just that portion of the family tree and break it out a little bit more. So the felids are a pretty diverse group. And what we're going to be zooming in on is the top portion of this diagram that just shows the things that are most closely related to our mountain lion. So that's what this figure down at the bottom is showing. That's the zoomed in version here. So this is showing us that the closest relatives of Puma concolor, which is our mountain lion down here at the bottom, circled in red, are actually this thing called the American cheetah. And so that's the picture that's shown on the far right-hand side of the screen. So this animal that's shown in a drawing with spots is actually the closest relative to our modern mountain lion. And this is kind of cool because this is an extinct species. This American cheetah is so called because it was able to run so quickly. And so if we think about the animals in North America that have really high rates of speed, you can think about the pronghorn antelope, for instance. This is an animal that runs at about 40 miles an hour. And none of the other carnivores that we have in this area are able to run so fast. And so why is that animal able to run that quickly? Well, it turns out it has an extinct predator that was able to run that quickly. So that's the American cheetah. So that was the closest relative of our North American mountain lion over here. But you'll also may notice that things like the cheetah found in Africa and also the jaguarundi, which is a big cat that's found in South America, are also pretty closely related to our mountain lion. There's also a big group of saber-toothed cats. That's just kind of a general name for organisms that have giant front canines. Several different lineages, but this particular one here shown up at the top, the saber-toothed cat, is pretty closely related to our modern mountain lion. So this is the mountain lion family tree. And what makes this particular species so interesting is that they actually have the largest species range of any wild terrestrial mammal in the Western Hemisphere. And so this figure here is showing you the, in all these red and pink and yellow colors, places where the mountain lion is now found or has been found in the past. And so what I hope you can appreciate from this figure is that all the way down to the very southern tip of South America and all the way up into about the middle layer of Canada has mountain lions now, currently, as shown in red. They're also shown in yellow over here are places where mountain lions used to be very common, but now are found only occasionally or maybe starting to move back into those areas. But those are areas where the mountain lion has been pretty much removed. However, as you can hopefully appreciate here, all of this red area are areas that there are currently large breeding populations of mountain lions or cougars. So with that giant range from South America to North America and Central America, you can imagine there are a lot of potential ecosystems that the mountain lion could inhabit. So we think about the mountain lion as primarily living in mountains. And so this particular picture here is showing one actually up in Colorado, up in the very high Rockies. And so some of those cats are exposed to very cold, snowy conditions and winters that are quite severe. And so this particular animal is in the snow and feeding on pretty much whatever it can find through the winter. But these cats are also found in the very dry deserts. They're found in the Sonoran Desert, occasionally out in Arizona, for instance, but they're also found in the Chihuahuan Desert all the way through Mexico, etc. So very dry deserts. They're also found in tropical rainforests. So this particular one here is a picture taken in Panama in in Central America, so found from very dry deserts to very wet rainforests to grasslands. So this picture here is an animal stalking through the short grass steppe of Colorado. They're found in deciduous forests occasionally as well, and then also in kind of midland shrubby types of zones. So mountain lions, because they do exist over this very wide species gradient, are found pretty much in every habitat that you could possibly imagine, including urban settings. And so this is one of my favorite pictures of a mountain lion, one of the Santa Monica mountain lions. So you may notice the Hollywood sign in the background. This is one of the mountain lions that lives right in LA. And we'll talk a little bit more later on about this population of mountain lions in the Santa Monica Mountains who have these radio collars, and their movements are very carefully tracked. So a lot of what we know about mountain lion behavior actually comes from this population right in LA in a very much urban setting. So what is it that makes the mountain lion so good at living everywhere and doing everything? Well, one of the major reasons is this animal is a habitat generalist, which means, as we talked about before, it doesn't have very specific requirements for where it lives as long as it has enough food to feed it. And because it can eat a wide variety of organisms, from insects, interestingly, to rodents, to fairly large deer, it can live pretty much anywhere. So the first thing that I want to point out here is that the cougar is much larger than any other cat that we're going to have in the majority portions of North America. So the picture that's shown over on the right over here is a bobcat versus a cougar in terms of size. So bobcats are generally maybe 3 to maybe 4 feet in length, and usually about 2 to 3 feet tall. An adult male mountain lion is more in the range of 7 to 8 feet long. Females are a little bit smaller. They're usually in the range of 5 to 6 feet, but these big males can be enormous. However, they're not necessarily that heavy, which is kind of interesting. They're kind of a long, lean cat. And so the female weight, again, tends to range from about 50 to 65 or so pounds. The big males can be upwards of 100 pounds in some cases, but it's going to depend a little bit on where they are, how much food they have, and how old they are. They can live from 10 to 16 years in the wild. Most of them are not going to live more than about 11 or 12 years in the wild, but they definitely can live longer in captivity where they're being fed constantly all the time, and there's less opportunity for them to get injured or to be fought out by other types of mammals. This is a species that's very solitary. So only about 3 to 5 days out of the entire year might a male and a female hang out together to do their breeding thing. And then they separate off again and very much stay on their own. And the main reason for that is that they have a giant home range. So any one particular mountain lion may actually go from 80 to 200 square miles as the only mountain lion in its area. The female home ranges are also quite big. So even on the smallest side of things, a female needs about 20 square miles of hunting in order to be able to just feed herself and her cubs. So because they are so big and so solitary, they need to range over a very large space to make sure they can find enough prey. We also tend to see differences in home range size based on sex. So as this table is showing you here, from about time from birth to the time at which a male sets up a new territory, they can actually move about 300 miles from the place they're born into a place that doesn't have any other cougars around and has enough food to feed them. So you actually may get very large dispersal happening during the time period right after the males are born. I do want to, on this slide here, show you a quick example of a mountain lion's skull. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my virtual background off so that you can see more easily the skulls that I have here so it doesn't cut them off. So this is actually a mountain lion's skull. So hopefully you can appreciate its skull is about the same size as a human head, but it's a little bit smaller. So this is an animal that it is able to eat prey of a variety of sizes, but it's going to not necessarily be able to eat anything bigger very easily anyway than a deer. That's about what it can take down. If you compare the size of a cougar skull to that of a bobcat, I have that right behind over here. So here is a bobcat skull. It is quite a bit smaller than that of the cougar, even though the bobcat's head is sort of relatively bigger for its body size than the cougar's is. So some characteristics of the cougar
Can't
skull.
see the skull.
At it from the front here, you can see that it has all of these coiled bones. These are called nasal turbinates that are very useful for olfaction. So this is what's helping them to scent and smell their prey very effectively. If you look at these skulls from the side, in comparison with something like a dog face, for instance, the face is quite short. And so they have the majority of their jaw power because they're able to put a lot of pressure in with these very sharp cutting canines. And they have quite a bit of what's called a sagittal crest up here at the top for muscle attachment. So they have a very strong bite. So cats in general tend to be ambush predators rather than chasing down their prey over a long distance. So usually what a mountain lion would do is to sit up in a tree high up above everyone else, watch for its prey to come, scent its prey coming, and then when it does show up, it will kind of sneak up on it from behind, jump on it, and puncture its neck. So usually that is how cats are going to attack, is from behind and getting a puncture, sort of a killing wound right to the back of the neck. So that's how this animal's working. Again, its head is not particularly big, but in comparison to its body size, but it's definitely bigger than the bobcat. So this is what we know about how the cougar works. Let's talk a little bit about its reproduction. As I mentioned before, when the offspring have gotten up to adulthood, they can disperse very long distance from the place when they were born. But that process takes a couple of years. So females, for instance, don't reach sexual maturity until they're usually about 2 years old. And at that point, they're able to actually reproduce and have kittens. So they can have from between 2 to 3 cubs per litter is kind of the usual. They'll usually have a twin or a triplet. But in some cases, the biggest litters that have been found are actually 6 individuals. So that's quite a few. They do not have specifically a breeding season like we see in certain organisms, but they do have the majority of young in either the summer or the fall is when most of their young are born. So the types of mountain lions then you can see in a population have to do to some extent by what their home range looks like and how much they need to feed themselves. So mountain lions can be broken into 3 main categories: transients, residents, and then immature organisms. So in the transient category, we usually have organisms that are for some reason lacking their own home range. So in many cases, this is going to be a young male that's leaving its mother for the first time and trying to strike out on its own to find new territory. And so these organisms are moving very large distances at a time, and they're usually just on their way somewhere else moving through. And so because these organisms don't have their own sort of defended home site, these are the ones that are much more likely to prey on livestock, to show up in cities, for instance, kind of on their way through to somewhere else. And so these are the ones that tend to interact more with humans in a negative way. Some of the transients also can be older males who have been displaced. So they had a home territory, but for some reason, something else came in and kicked them out. Or in some cases, humans came in and did a little bit more development in that area. And so it's not able to support them anymore. And so they take off from there. However, the majority of mountain lions are actually considered resident. So they have an established home range. They're not necessarily defending it in the same way that other territorial animals might, but they don't tend to overlap with others, mostly because they're trying not to compete for the same prey sources. So even though they don't defend it, they do go to all the areas in their own particular home range. And so they can actually visit and hunt all of those over the course of several days. If they do find another lion, one of these transients coming through, they will fight. And so this is actually a large source of mortality. A lot of mountain lions are actually killed when a transient comes in and then is basically fought with by the resident in that area. The size of the home range of those residents is going to depend a little bit on how good the habitat quality is. If they're in an area that have a lot of prey because there is a lot of really good plant material for that prey, then they may have a fairly small home range. Whereas if you're in an area where the habitat is really disturbed, if there aren't a whole lot of prey items around, they have to expand their home range habitat because of that. What we tend to see is that male home ranges, again, are quite large, and that's usually because they're overlapping with that of several females. So they're not competing directly with the females for the same food resources in all cases, because they're kind of going from one area of a female's range to another female's range to another female's range. So they're not directly competing with the same female all the time, but they also usually have kind of their own space as well. The third group of mountain lions fall into this category of immature animals. And so these are the ones that, although they may not necessarily be still drinking milk from the mother, they are still dependent on the mother to help feed them. And so they may not be big enough to actually hunt their own prey consistently yet. And so for a couple years, they may stay with the mother. The mother is doing the primary hunting, and then the young are eating off of her kills from there. So what are pumas eating? Again, puma is just another word for mountain lion, another word for cougar. What we find in North America anyway, is that they tend to specialize most on white-tailed deer, but the type of prey they eat actually changes by the age of the animal. And so what we have on this particular figure is the size of prey on the x-axis down here at the bottom, ranging from fairly small prey, like little carnivores like skunks, for instance, to a little bit larger prey like porcupines, and then getting up into deer and elk as kind of the biggest things that mountain lions can eat. And what we tend to see is that when they are young, so again, they're within about 1 to 2 years, they're primarily going to eat prey that are also small. So they're going to be eating skunks quite a bit. They're going to be eating rabbits. They're going to be eating rodents. And again, sometimes they even eat insects, like they tend to like large grasshoppers, for instance. So as they get a little bit older, however, as they get up to about 3 or 4 years, that's when they make the jump up to slightly larger prey, specifically fawns or young deer, and then eventually getting to older deer. And then by the time that they are several years old, at this point, they can actually take down the larger prey, including elk, if that's within their habitat. So at this point, when you have again, young males that are dispersing from one area into another, that's also when they would tend to go after livestock that are within this particular size range. So sheep, for instance, or goats or young cattle might be prey for a transient mountain lion coming through at that particular time point. But again, the type of prey they're eating is generally associated with how old they are. So, how big is the mountain lion population? We know that they exist over a very wide gradient, again, all the way from up in Canada down to very southern tip of South America. So although they're found over this very wide range, we don't actually know a whole lot about their population size, partially because they are so secretive. A lot of the areas in which they're living are away from major human habitations, and they're really good at hiding. They have that kind of cryptic coloration that allows them to blend into their backgrounds, and they don't want to be seen for the most part, so that makes them very hard to count. So we actually really don't have any idea how big the entire population is. However, we do have evidence that particular populations that are being studied in various areas of their range are actually declining in a lot of places. So although they're considered of least concern currently from the IUCN, which is in charge of basically tracking species that are considered endangered, threatened, or of least concern, they say that the population trend is actually on the decrease in many of these areas. So we do know that one of the major causes of mortality for mountain lions on a yearly basis is actually legal hunting. So about 4,000 or so probably are killed per year. This is again a little bit difficult to track because not all of the places in which mountain lions can be hunted are actually tracking how many are hunted per year. So of the ones that are reported, we know that there are about 4,000 or so killed by legal hunting, or what are considered problem animals who are killed because they are too close to humans or because they have been shown to take wildlife or been shown to take people's pets, for instance. So those are kind of some major sources of mortality for this species. But again, we don't really know totally how many there are. And so there've been a lot of work recently done on trying to figure out, well, what is the most accurate way to figure out what the population size is of cougars or mountain lions? So one of the things that you can do is look at the things that are left behind, things like scat or things like footprints. And we'll look at an example of that in a moment. But something else that's becoming really useful lately is trail camera sightings. So a lot of people have trail cameras out in their back pastures, out behind their houses. And then also a lot of researchers specifically are setting out trail cameras in places where these large carnivores might be going. And so we're actually getting a better and better estimate of population sizes based on these trail cameras. So sometimes these animals can be identified with particular identifying markings, and we can tell exactly which cougar is which, even though they may range, again, over a very wide 200-mile radius. So one of the cool studies that came out just a couple of years ago is using footprints to actually tell not only which cougars are which, but also what sex they are, so whether they're male or female. So this is important for being able to understand how the population might change. If we know how many females there are in a population, we know how many offspring they could have per year and kind of what the population trajectory is. Is it increasing? Is it decreasing in a given area? And so the next couple of slides that I have here are specifically talking about how you can use footprints to determine which animal is which. So to start out with, how do we know what a mountain lion track looks like? How do we differentiate it from other big carnivore tracks? Well, one of the first things that you can look at is the size. So to start out with, as shown in this figure in the middle, they can be about 4 inches or so long. The footprint is about the same size as a human hand in the really big males. So it's extremely large in comparison to pretty much any other type of track that you can have out there. The other things that you could potentially confuse a mountain lion track with are bobcats, and sometimes even people confuse them for a big domestic cat. So the way that you can tell bobcat and domestic cat tracks from that of a mountain lion is really the size. So you're going to see some similarities in toe and pad shape in both of these cases. What we tend to see is that cat tracks have a little M up here at the top and then 3 lobes at the bottom of the paw of the pad. So they look kind of like a little mountain, the paw of the pad itself. You'll also notice that any of these cat tracks are not going to have claw marks extending out to the top. That's because cougars, like all other cats, or with one exception anyway, are able to retract their claws and keep them up off the ground to keep them sharp so they can be really useful as weapons. So that means that when they're walking around, those claws are not going to be left as marks for these tracks. So size, the little M-shaped mountain shape of the paw, the lack of claws, all tell you that those are cats. And then the other thing that helps you differentiate a mountain lion from a bobcat, for instance, is the fact that their toes are a little bit unequal in size, and they also curve in towards the center. So that's what's shown in this bottom figure over here. They're what are called asymmetrical toes, so that the leading toe up here at the center is basically like your middle finger. It's longer and skinnier than all the rest. And so the animal kind of toes in a little bit, and its paw tracks are going to tend to have that longer leading toe. Whereas in the bobcat, the toes are pretty much equal in size and also sort of equally placed in the print. So this bottom figure over here is showing you what the picture of that mountain lion paw would look like in an animal that has been sedated, so you can look at it. So again, that middle toe is leading ahead of the others. And so that's going to show up in the print. And again, you can see that kind of M-shaped mountain or volcano-shaped almost paw, which is typical of cats. So what we can do then is looking at these various paw prints, determine how recently a particular animal has gone through, and also look at specific characteristics of that paw print to tell us which animal's which. So this is from that paper that specifically was saying, okay, if we take pictures of cougar tracks, can we tell which ones are which? And so they kind of separated out the track types into poor quality, as shown in A, medium quality, as shown in B, and really good quality tracks, as shown in C. And so what they did for this particular paper were take these really good quality tracks, the ones that have very sharp defined edges, and you can really see all the characteristics of the track, and then took a picture of it from above with rulers on either side. So what this allowed us, the researchers rather, to do is to determine, first of all, how wide the entire track is, and to have a common frame of reference across all the tracks that they found in this particular territory. So once that picture has been taken with all these identifying characteristics, including who took it, which animal perhaps it belongs to if they already know that, and then which foot, whether it's front, back, left or right side, they're able to put this footprint into a computer program and actually assign little tiny dots to various positions of the toe that are consistent across all different cougar footprints. And so this allows you to basically digitize and produce a fingerprint almost of what this particular animal's footprint looks like. And so it's not important to know exactly which dots are which in this case, but basically it shows you the top and the bottom and then the width of each one of these toes for positioning, and then the top and the bottom and the width of each one of these pad characteristics, and then gives you a particular number for each one of those footprints. So then they were able to take that information and put it into a computer program to see if we could differentiate between males and females based on just those characteristics. And what they found was indeed you could do that. So this figure is a little bit complicated, but basically what it's showing you here is points that cluster together in a group are belonging to the same sex. And so what we see is that females tend to cluster together. All of these red spots are pretty much found in the same area. And all of these blue spots for the males are pretty much found in the same area. So what that means is you can use those characteristics that we talked about before, the length of toes, the width of toes, the pad length, et cetera, to determine not only which sex is which, so whether the paw track belongs to a female or to a male, but also in some cases where that particular animal is coming from. And so for instance, they were looking at animals that were found in areas including Camino Cielo and also in Big Bend in 2 different trails in their study site. And in that case, they don't know exactly which sex those animals belong to. They were unknown. But since they cluster with the males, in the case of the Camino Cielo unknown, and with the females, in the case of the Big Bend individual, those are probably then going to be male in the case of Camino Cielo and female in the case of Big Bend. So this is kind of testing their hypothesis that you could use the size and shape of these tracks to tell whether it's a male or a female. So this is going to be something that's pretty helpful for researchers going forward to be able to determine what the population size is for animals that are very secretive and hard to find. So let's talk a little bit now about some of the things that are causing deaths of mountain lions besides just the specific hunting by humans. So one of the major problems for mountain lion populations is that the habitats that they're living in are becoming more and more fragmented. This is something that we see as a problem in pretty much any type of wild species, that there's less what's called contiguous habitat, that all the space is able to be traversed easily by the animals. So the more roads that are put in, for instance, or the more housing developments that are put in the center or sort of some portion of a mountain lion's home range, the less total area it has to work with. And so this is going to decrease the amount of prey it can get and decrease the amount of offspring it can have, decreasing the population sizes. However, another giant source of mortality, especially in North America, is accidental death from a variety of reasons. So roadkill, especially in very built up areas, is definitely a big problem for cougars in some areas. But actually even a bigger problem is poisoning due to rodenticides. So these animals, as I mentioned before, are eating a wide variety of prey sources, including rats. They love to eat rats. They're about the right size. They're easy to catch. And so in a study that was done a couple years ago in the Santa Monica mountain lions out in around LA, they actually took samples from 28 mountain lions, and 26 of those had this rodenticide in their blood. So almost all of the mountain lions in the area had been eating poison rodents. And it actually does kill some of them as well if they eat it in too high a concentration. So 6 out of those 28 were actually specifically killed by eating these poison rodents. So this is a major source of mortality and also of disease causing, basically, especially in mountain lions that live close to areas where there are humans poisoning rodents. Disease is also a problem for them. So there was actually a big outbreak in the last year or so. So this paper here in the center was published actually just in February of 2020 of a population in Colorado where you actually have a lot of plague infesting pumas or mountain lions in that particular area. So all the way throughout the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and the Four Corners region, there's been a big outbreak of plague recently. And that probably has come from the fact that these mountain lions in the Four Corners region are eating things, again, like rodents, specifically things like prairie dogs, which tend to have a fairly high plague load within them. And so this has been a major outbreak, and a lot of animals have actually died from this because of this exposure to plague. We also have a decrease in mountain lion populations due to starvation, usually because of competition with other large predators. So we may think of mountain lions as being, these giant predators. They're really kind of the high top of the ecosystem. But what was found in a fairly recent paper actually is that they may actually be subordinate predators, in that they're really good at killing prey, but they're not necessarily good at keeping other predators away from it. And so in this particular study, what they found is that everything from gray wolves to grizzly bears to black bears to jaguars down in South America and Central America were stealing the prey of the mountain lions. So they're called kleptoparasites in this case, which basically means they come in and steal someone else's prey. And that works in this case because the mountain lion, remember, doesn't weigh very much. So it's a really good ambush predator. If it can sneak up behind something, it can kill it, but it can't really defend that kill afterwards. And so in a lot of cases, gray wolves or black bears would specifically come in and chase the mountain lion away and eat its kill before it could actually get very far. So what this paper also found is that there are a couple species that the mountain lion can actually chase away. So coyotes, for instance, it can chase away from prey, and also maned wolves, which are really really interesting looking fox looking on stilts almost animals found in South America. So in those two cases, it can actually chase those guys away from their prey. But for most of these other big predators, they're actually considered subordinate. And so in many cases, they're not as good a competitor at keeping resources as these bigger predators are. And so there was a paper that was published just, again, very recently in this last year, just a couple months ago, that specifically looked at the interaction between wolves and mountain lions in a place where they're both found. So what they found in this particular area of the Bridger Teton Forest and National Park over here. So again, here's the star up in the far corner where we're looking at this particular population, is that as there were wolves in a particular area, so that's shown on the x-axis here, number of wolves from 20 to 80, the number of adult mountain lions, pumas in this particular case, is shown on the y-axis. So what hopefully you can appreciate from this figure is that there's a negative relationship. So whenever there are more wolves in an area, there are fewer adult mountain lions in that area. So that could be due to direct competition for resources. Remember, as I mentioned before, wolves are better at chasing mountain lions away from their prey. And so it could be that mountain lions are just avoiding areas where there are lots of wolves. But it also seems to be that wolves themselves are actually eating mountain lion young. And so there was a particular example in this study where they tracked several mountain lions in a particular area with very high wolf density. And all three of the kittens of this particular mountain lion were actually killed off by wolves, one right after another. And so in many cases, between direct competition and killing off of the young, there basically can be very few mountain lions living in an area with very high wolf concentrations. The other thing to note about this particular diagram is that the two lines that are shown here, the gray line is without harvest. So this is going to be areas where mountain lions are not allowed to be hunted, versus the with harvest shown in the black line, where mountain lions are allowed to be hunted. And so what we're looking at here is the difference, the distance between these two lines. So for instance, if we look at fairly low wolf density, about 20 or so wolves per basically this 100 or so, or sorry, 1,000 kilometers square area, what we see is that two more pumas basically can be supported if they are not actively being hunted at the same time. And that difference maintains pretty much the same, even up to very high wolf densities. So basically, mortality from humans hunting them, as well as competition from wolves, are decreasing mountain lion populations, at least in the Bridger Tetons National Forest. So this last picture here from that same paper is showing you the areas where wolves and mountain lions tend to overlap. And so the historic range of the mountain lion, where they used to be found again in fairly high numbers, is shown in light green over here. And then the dark green area is the current range, where we have large ish concentrations of mountain lions. The gray wolf is shown in the little shaded hatched areas here. And so hopefully what you can appreciate from this is in places where there are fairly high densities of wolves, anywhere where you have this basically crosshatched overlapping, this is an area where cougars or mountain lions are going to be doing worse in population size because they're directly competing with wolves. And so what this paper suggests is that in any of those areas where this is happening, where both wolves and mountain lions are in the same place, that we should carefully consider whether or not mountain lions should allow to be hunted in those areas, because it may actually drive the population down too much if we are hunting them and they're also competing with wolves. All right, so the next couple slides that I have are specifically about humans and mountain lions, how they interact historically, and then how they are kind of interacting today. So one example of historical interactions with cougars is actually in this really cool cave out in the Rio Grande Pecos River area. It's called Panther Cave because it has all of these beautiful cave paintings that have not been very carefully dated. It's probably somewhere between about 7,000 years before the current era, up to about 600 years or so in the current era. And so all of these beautiful cave paintings extend for about 100 feet all the way through this cave. But one of the centerpieces is this really neat painting of a cougar, of a mountain lion. You can tell again it's a cougar because it has that really long tail. So we know it's not a bobcat, and it's a very definite cat shape. So this is about 10 feet long from nose to tip of tail. It's a very large painting and definitely the centerpiece. And so this large painting, compared with the fact that they also have paintings of humans dressed up in kind of ritualistic headgear that have cat ears, seems to suggest anyway that for this particular group of people, the mountain lion was actually a very important religious totem that was crucial for this particular tribe and sort of the spirit animal, for lack of a better word in this case, for that particular tribe. So culturally anyway, cougars have been very important for a variety of human populations that coexisted with them for several thousands of years. However, most of our modern cougar-human interactions are not quite so smooth. So what we tend to see is that most of these interactions take place when mountain lions, again, usually in a transient way, come through human population areas and are either shot by them or hit by cars and in some ways damaged in that way, or they come in and eat people's livestock, eat people's pets, etc., and so are removed as problem animals in that case. However, there are some populations of mountain lions that are actively being studied and interacting in somewhat less damaging ways with human populations. And so an example of this is this population of mountain lions that I alluded to earlier in the Santa Monica Mountains outside of Los Angeles, inside of Los Angeles actually in some places. So this particular study is really interesting because they've radio collared, as shown in the figure here in the middle, pretty much all of the mountain lions in this area. So once the animal reaches adulthood, they are radio collared and can be tracked pretty much every minute of the day. So we know exactly where they are, we know who they were interacting with, we know what their home range sizes were, and a wide variety of other scientific pieces of information can be taken from this. So this has then resulted in some really interesting research and also some really cool videos. So I have at the end of this presentation a link to a couple of videos that you can watch specifically from the Santa Monica Mountains National Park Service that has a bunch of really beautiful videos with trail cameras and in some cases also cell phone cameras that people have taken and then uploaded. So you can really see the behavior of these animals with each other and also the ways in which they do the research on these animals. So in order to check their health and to replace the batteries in the radio collars, for instance, they will occasionally dart them so that they can be knocked out for a little bit. The research is done on them and then they wake up and run away like there was no problem. So we actually have a lot of really cool data on how far each one of these individual animals go. So what this picture is showing you is from about over a 10-year period, several of the tracked mountain lions and the amount of space they traveled throughout Los Angeles. So each one of these dots of a different color is a different individual animal. And so hopefully what you can appreciate here is that there are some animals like the yellow one shown over here, which is given the name P10 as the number, actually traverses very far across the entire city. So it has specific areas in which it tends to hunt and it likes to hunt, but it also has probably at least almost 100 kilometers worth of total foraging space throughout the majority of Los Angeles. There are other animals that have slightly smaller home ranges, but they can still be scattered around and found in various areas. And so in some cases, this may be because they are moving territories or because they may be expanding territories a little bit because something else has encroached on them. But what makes this really cool is that you can actually see where individuals are from the pings from these GPS radio collars. So I would suggest if you're interested in specifically mountain lions and how they interact with urban environments, that you go to this website and look at some of these pictures and videos and look at some of these maps, because they're really interesting in showing how these animals actually interact with each other and how they are living in very close proximity to humans in many cases. So getting specifically to us here in Texas, we know the mountain lions are found in fairly high concentrations in some areas anyway, in the western parts of the country, but are they found here in Texas? And yes, in fact, they are. So what this figure is showing you, it's from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, is the areas that are in red down here, specifically at the very far west Texas, are areas that have fairly high population numbers of mountain lions. And so what we're looking at here are breeding populations anywhere from about 289 confirmed sightings over that 10-year period, shown down here in the very far west portions of the country, sorry, of the state, up to places where they've only been sighted occasionally. So any of these counties that are in green are places that had at least one confirmed mountain lion sighting over the last 10 years. And what we notice is that here in Grayson County, we have in fact had confirmed sightings. This particular map, again, only ended in 2019. And so we have two more counties here, actually in very recent sightings, very close to Dallas, that can be filled in. So Collin County, specifically over here, has had sightings in 2020 as well. So we have them here in Texas. But in this portion of East Texas, they're probably not in very high numbers. And in many cases are probably a transient male or a transient young female dispersing into a new area rather than something who is staying here as a resident. So some of those recent sightings, like I mentioned before, some of you probably heard about this in the news, especially if you live closer down to Dallas. Over the course of a couple of weeks, actually in late 2020, there were at least 3 confirmed sightings here in North Texas. So one on the 22nd of November, another one on the 1st of December, and another on the 7th of December up here in Princeton. And so based on the spacing of these and also kind of the direction in which the dates are going, it's likely that this was a single transient animal that was coming from the western portions of the country and looking for new habitat and sort of passing through. And so these particular sightings are probably from just one animal. And that particular animal has probably actually been killed. About a week after this last sighting in Princeton, there was an animal who was shot in this general area. And so that particular animal has probably been removed. So they are here in North Texas, probably passing through, but eventually we may start to see populations who are able to breed and stay in this area in higher numbers. And so we would likely in the future be seeing more and more interactions between humans and mountain lions. So how are we keeping track then of where these mountain lions are in Texas and what is actually happening with them? So most of the research is actually being done on kind of the southwestern portions of the state, because again, that's where we have the highest concentrations of mountain lions. And so there are a couple of research institutes, including the Borderlands Research Institute. That's a collaboration between private landowners, Sul Ross University, and also the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department that are looking specifically at mountain lions in the Chihuahuan Desert borderlands. There also, Texas A&M Kingsville has a feline research program at the Cesar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute that is doing a lot of extensive tracking of mountain lions in that area and figuring out, again, where some of these transients are going. So these are kind of the two dedicated current sort of big research areas in mountain lions in Texas, but there are other people who are doing more sort of spotty work scattered around throughout the state as well. And so the more we can know about mountain lions in Texas and in other parts of their range where they're not as common, the better information we'll have to be able to help manage those populations and also manage the interactions between humans, wildlife, that can be so problematic for both of those sides of the equation. So this little slide here is going to try to help us identify whether or not the thing that you saw on your trail camera is actually a mountain lion or not. They can be a little bit difficult to distinguish sometimes, especially from kind of bad trail camera pictures. And so only one of the animals shown on this particular list of pictures is actually a confirmed mountain lion. So if you will go ahead, Alan, and launch poll number 3, that's specifically about which of these pictures, go ahead and vote on which one of these you think is actually showing us a mountain lion. And when it looks like those have slowed down, Alan, you can go ahead and share the results. All right, so it looks like a few of you thought that number 2 was showing one. A few of you thought number 3. Most people thought number 4, and then a few people thought number 5. So this hopefully helps you understand it can be very difficult, right, to tell which one is which. So in fact, if we look at which of these animals are which, the first picture here is actually coyote. So you can tell the ears are much more pointed and taller than that of a cat. Also, it has a much sort of bushier tail than we would see in any of the cats. But size-wise and body shape-wise, sometimes people can confuse them, especially if the picture's a little blurry. This next picture over here, number 2, is really tricky. And the reason is because there's actually a stick back behind this bobcat that looks like a tail. But you can tell it's a bobcat and not a cougar for a couple of reasons. First of all, it has striping on the front legs. And second of all, there's a dark black stripe here, which would be kind of in the middle of the tail if it was dark, if it was actually a cougar or mountain lion. But that, in fact, is the black tip tail that we see at the end of a bobcat. So although it looks very similar, and you could definitely confuse them, what you're looking for is striping to let you know that it's a bobcat, and also that shortish tail. Number 3, we in fact have a house cat, but again, if you saw it in the dark and didn't have a size reference, you could potentially think it was about the right color. This number 4 over here is in fact our cougar. And so it's very muscular. It has that kind of light brown color all the way around. It's kind of hard to see the tail in this case, but it doesn't have any of the striping that we would associate with a bobcat. And that nice tawny color means that it is in fact a cougar. Number 5, again, is showing us the bobcat. You can see that little short bob tail to differentiate them. So A+ for those of you who chose number 4, and those of you who chose for the other ones, it's understandable why you would go for those. So the last and most important question that we have to deal with here are cougars going to be dangerous to me, to my livestock, to my pets? And so Alan, if you'll go ahead and launch the second poll, I have some things about specifically human fatalities that I want to get kind of people's opinions on what you think. So how many humans have been killed by mountain lions, specifically confirmed by mountain lions in the last 100 years? So which do you think is the closest estimate? All right, super. So it looks like 55% said fewer than 10, 26% said fewer than 20, 17% said fewer than 30, and then no one thought that more than 1,000 people per year, or I mean, over the last 100 years have been killed by mountain lions. Cool. So if we go back to this question of will cougars eat me specifically, the answer there is could they? Possibly. Would they? Probably not. So if we get to that question of how many actual documented attacks and mountain lion kills on humans there have been in the last 100 years, there have been 125 documented, again, over the last 100 years, so about less than one per year, and fewer than 30 of those are fatal. And to just put that in context a little bit, this is actually a map from a YouTube analytics video that looks at the number of large wildlife kills of humans over the last 100 years. And so what we're looking at here, the cougars are in pink. So between 23 to about 27 confirmed kills over the last 100 years of humans by mountain lions. In context, bears have been known to kill about 129 people. Sharks have been known to kill about 130 people. And if you put this in context of other accidental causes of death, all of these large vertebrate attacks basically disappear because the thing that kills most humans are actually insect stings. So way more humans are killed by stings of wasps who are allergic to it than are killed by large vertebrates, especially large cats like cougars. So something else to take from this map, hopefully, is that you should probably never live in Florida because everything there wants to kill you, snakes, alligators, etc. But the few documented cougar kills have really only been up in the mountains. There have been a couple examples here and there where other cougars have been shown to kill humans as well, but actually documented for sure mountain lion kills have been very on humans. So fewer than 30 over 100 years, your chances are pretty good. People, whoever, who live very close to mountain lion communities do, in many cases, have the potential of losing pets or livestock to those. And so because dogs and cats are much more the size of prey that mountain lions are looking for, if you have those animals out unsupervised in places where mountain lions are hunting, they could very likely take those. Similarly, if you have a transient mountain lion coming through an area where there are livestock, they could potentially take those as well. So humans, they're very unlikely to kill. Livestock and pets, they very much could if they're coming through in the area. So there are a lot of times, though, that particular kills are blamed on a mountain lion when it was actually wolves or coyotes or other things that took them down. And so the way that you can tell a mountain lion kill from other types of large predators is that, first of all, if any of you have cats, you may know that they like to bury things. So they bury their prey. If they have it, they like to scrape things over their food bowls. They like to bury their feces. Cats don't want you to know they're there. And so if you come across a prey item that has been buried in leaves or has stuff kind of scraped over it, that could potentially belong to a mountain lion. The other thing to note is that, again, mountain lions tend to kill as ambush predators from behind. And so usually what they'll do is leap down and basically sever the spine at the back of the neck. And so if there are puncture wounds in the head and neck, specifically, that could potentially be due to a mountain lion. What's also kind of interesting is that mountain lions don't like to eat hair. And so if you have something that's killed by a wolf or a coyote, for instance, they'll generally just sort of dive in and rip off shreds. But mountain lions actually trim away or pluck off the hair before actually starting to eat. And so if there's a trimmed area around the place where the eating had started, then it could potentially be a mountain lion. And then also they tend to start at the diaphragm area and kind of go up from there. So again, those things help you know that it actually was a mountain lion that probably killed this particular animal and not something else. So the last question then to deal with is how should you interact with a cougar if that should take place? Hopefully, many of you have probably seen recently several videos that have come out about direct encounters with mountain lions. And so this is something that's happening more frequently as humans move into more mountain lion habitat and vice versa. So what are the things then that you should not do if a mountain lion actually attacks you? Go ahead and go in the poll here. So again, what should you not do out of this list? whenever it looks like people are slowing down, you can go ahead and show the results. All right. So the majority of people said you should not play dead. And that is in fact the right answer here. So all these other things are different depending on what large carnivore species you're facing. For instance, if you're looking at a bear, playing dead, if you're being attacked by a bear, is actually the right thing to do because the bear will get bored usually and just wander away. If you play dead for a mountain lion, the mountain lion thinks that you're really easy prey. And so playing dead, crouching down, getting small are all the opposite things that you should do with a mountain lion. You should always face them, make noise, you don't scream, you never run away, and basically just make yourself look big and let the mountain lion know that you are there, you see it, and it's not going to be able to take you down. So the things that you should do on encountering a mountain lion, these actually come from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department specifically as recommendations. So if you know for sure, first of all, that you have seen a mountain lion, or if you know, for instance, that there has been one killed in the area, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Division are the ones that you should contact for this. Because again, they are trying to keep track of where these mountain lions are and make sure that we have confirmed sightings reported. If you specifically encounter a mountain lion out when walking around, if you're walking with children, you should definitely make sure the children come up off the ground because children are, again, within the preferred prey size of mountain lions. And so if you get them up and on you, they're not going to be seen as a potential prey. You don't want to bend down to do that, but pick the children up off the ground if they are of a small size. You should not actively approach it. If you see it off kind of doing its own thing, if you see mountain lion kittens playing around, you should not actively approach it yourself, but you should stand your ground. You should stand there and look at it and talk loudly to it, but not scream. You should also not make any quick moves because if any of you have cats, know a cat impulse to chase something that moves quickly is almost impossible to avoid. And so if you do not run away, if you do not bend down, if you face them in an upright position and then kind of slowly back away while making noise and making yourself look big, those are the best things to do when encountering this animal. Again, it's very important that you do not run because that will immediately make the chase start. So if everything that you can do to make yourself big is important. Most of the time when people encounter mountain lions, it will just be when a mountain lion is walking by and you happen to be out hiking on the trail, for instance, you see it from a distance. Again, most of the time, if you just kind of slowly back away and make yourself large, but not necessarily actively a threat, then that's how the reaction is going to end. However, there are a few examples where the mountain lion does become aggressive. Usually, again, this is because it's a hungry young transient who has not eaten for a long time and is really driven by food, or it's a female where there are cubs in the area. So if you saw that video posted back a couple months ago with a person who was out running by themselves, which is maybe never a good idea in mountain lion territory out in California, that mountain lion continued to kind of come after him as he was walking backwards and making noise for a long distance. But that was probably because she had 3 cubs who were playing on the trail and she was really trying to defend to make sure he was not going to go after them. So if the animal, however, does actively attack you, as has happened in a couple of places, you should be able to fight it off, throwing rocks, hitting them with sticks. People have stabbed them in the eyes with pens before. Anything you can do to fight back is going to be good for a mountain lion attack. So if you can make yourself not easy prey, that is the best thing that you can do if you actually encounter them. So that is kind of the Cliff Notes version of mountain lions. So if you're interested in learning more about them, there is a really great website by panthera.org that does a lot of research into big cats and has a lot of public outreach as well. So if you're interested in getting involved in some of that, definitely check that website out. If you're interested in looking at, again, some of those videos of mountain lion kittens and mountain lions interacting in the Santa Monica Mountains, I have the link for the National Park Service, specifically Puma page there that has some really great videos and great information about that particular population. So definitely check those things out. But I'm going to go ahead and ask 4 questions now. So you can put them in the chat and I'll get to them in that order. Or if you want to raise your hand, if you click on the participants tab, you should be able to have a little blue raise hand hopefully. And then you can be called on and I'll answer your questions as they come in. So what questions do we have about mountain lions?
I'm sure, I'm sure some of you got questions. Feel free to jump
Yeah,
in.
so I see in the chat, David Turner has asked, do they feed on feral hogs? Yes, actually that is one of their preferred prey sources, especially down here where feral hog populations are high. If you remember back from the graph about where in North America most of the cougars are found, there aren't a ton of feral hog populations up in those northern areas. Most of them are down here in Texas. So down here, yes, they do feed on feral hogs, especially on the younger ones. Sometimes if there is a sounder of feral hogs, they're not going to really take down that entire sounder because the adult hogs, as probably you know, are large and can actually fight back. But if they can ambush one from behind, they think they're delicious. All right, I'm seeing several more in the chat now, so I'm going to kind of go in the order they come in. So the question, are they deterred by motorized vehicles like ATVs? So that is likely. They don't tend to like loud noises. And so if you are riding your ATV out in the back pasture, out in the mountains or whatever, you're less likely to be attacked than if you are just walking or biking. So they have been known to attack bikers on occasion, something that's quite quiet and moving through at a quick speed, at about the speed of a running deer, for instance, they're going to go after, and also hikers. But again, usually they're going to ambush you from above. So it's unlikely that if you're riding your ATV around that they're going to attack you while on that. We have a question from Robert Bender in the chat who asks, how likely are they to increase in our area in the future? So Robert, that depends a lot on what the population of their prey does, and also how the human populations continue to grow in the area. So it is likely that we're going to get more and more interactions with them as populations out in the west, for instance, continue to grow and they keep sort of moving their way back over east. And so it is likely that we're going to get more and more interactions with mountain lions going forward. However, one of the things that's different about Texas than most of the other states is that hunting in Texas, although you do have to have a license, they are considered a non-game species and there's no specific hunting season, nor is there a limit on the number of cougars that can be hunted. And so because there is more predation pressure from humans hunting them, they're less likely to move into urban areas or urbanized areas than they might be out in the West a little bit more, like in California. Gina Erickson asks, can you talk about the newborns in the photos? They're striped. Yes, that is a really good question. So as we see in a lot of young mammals, they actually have a different color of coat when they're babies versus when they're adults. So you can think about this as something you see in deer as well. If you think about fawns, they're all spotted. So young mammals need to be able to hide a little bit more effectively. And so this coat coloration that has spots and stripes is actually called disruptive coloration. And so the idea is to help break up the body shape of the organism so it's harder to see from other predators. Remember, things like coyotes will sometimes eat mountain lion young if they're by themselves, if the mother's out hunting, for instance, and wolves definitely eat them. And so if they can blend in a little better to their environment, they are going to be more likely to survive to adulthood. So we do see those spots and stripes in the kittens, which make them really cute. They also have bright blue eyes when they're born. They're just precious when they're kittens especially. And then by the time that they get up to about 1 or 2 years old, they start to lose that striping and spotting, and then they turn into their adult forms, which is this nice kind of tawny brown all the way over. All right, Carolyn Finley asks in the chat, how can we protect the mountain lion and keep their numbers from declining in Texas? So probably the best things to do here, Caroline, are to support habitat and decrease fragmentation. Because again, that's one of the major drivers, especially of all these big carnivores, is if you have areas that are protected and areas that are good contiguous habitat with lots of prey, you're more likely to be able to support large predators over the long term. And so that's kind of one of the best things you can do. But other really good things to help reduce accidental mortality is to not poison rodents. So if you want to remove rodents from your area, trap them, that's great. But poisoning rodents is actually a huge cause of decrease of predators of a ton of different forms. So bobcats are poisoned when they're eating poisoned rodents, as well as these large cougars. Coyotes can be poisoned that way as well. You may not care about those as much, but it's kind of a horrible way to die, right? Dogs and domestic dogs and cats, if eating poisoned rodents, can be killed. So generally, if you can trap rodents and kill them with snap traps, I would always suggest that rather than poisoning them, because poison gets everywhere and kills a lot of things that are non-standard, including owls and large raptors. So those things are useful. The other thing to consider is, because mountain lions are unregulated as, well, I mean, they're regulated in that you have to have a hunting license, but not in numbers. You could consider contacting the people in charge of setting those policies and suggesting that maybe either quotas or limits are put on to mountain lion hunting, or that we at least know how many of them are being killed per year by having to report every time you kill a mountain lion. So those things are probably the best thing to do. Support habitat, make sure we have contiguous habitat, reduce accidental mortality, and maybe think about how many we're actually hunting per year. Donna Piercy points out in the chat that there's a really good Facebook page called Texas Native Cats. If you'd like to get more involved, yeah, that's a really good point. I'm seeing if there are any questions in here. Oh, a question from Becky Bertoni. Is Panther Cave open to the public? Yes, it is. I think you can only access it through boats. And so I'm not sure right now if it's something that you can get to because of pandemic restrictions, but it is something that if you get a chance to go out there at some point, it's really amazing to look at. So yes, it is open to the public. It is a protected site. And so you're not able to get up and actually, you know, like scrape at the cave paintings, but you can get up there, and there are tours that are given of that site. I think it's a National Park Service cultural site, and so it is regulated in that way, but you should definitely go look at it if you get the chance. I'm going through the list. Okay, I'm not seeing other specific questions. So does anyone else have a question that they want to ask about mountain lions?
I was on a meeting talking about mountain lions. I was afraid if I talked to you, everybody in the meeting would hear me.
Sorry, Claire, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Can you speak up a little louder? You're really, really quiet. Can you speak up, please? Or get closer to the mic? Yeah, sorry, Claire, I still can't hear you at all. Claire, maybe if you put some information into the chat, I can address it. I'm sorry, I can't hear anything coming through your microphone except for some background noise.
So Jessica, you are getting a lot of good compliments on your presentation in the chat, as I'm sure you've seen. It was a great presentation. I know I learned a couple of things, even though I've seen a number of these presentations on mountain lions. So really appreciate your taking time, particularly since you've got other business going on today, to present for us today.
Well, thank you. If any of you do have other questions, you can always email me directly. It's jhealy@austincollege.edu. So you can contact me directly, or again, go to that Facebook page that was pointed out in the chat. Texas Native Cats.
Okay, if there's not any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop our meeting. I have been recording this, and it will be posted out on the Friends of Hagerman website over the next couple of days. I really appreciate everybody's attendance today. We had a good crowd, and much appreciated. Thanks again, Jessica. You did a great job today.